All right, folks, hate to say it, but things in crypto will get worse before they get better, but they will get better. So, why do I say this? It's because of the Middle Eastern confrontation. It's going to drive up inflation, and of course, oil is going to go up, which is the main reason. Donald Trump has given a 2 week ultimatum to Iran to come up with some kind of solution before the US goes in with their strikes, guns ablazing. Now, they're going to host a conference in Geneva because, the Geneva is generally the place for world peace and stuff. And other nations are going to come and try to talk to Iran as well. Here's the thing, though. The Iranian-backed Shiite militias have already said that if the U.S. gets involved in the war, which I think they will, they're going to strike U.S. bases, which is going to escalate the war. Now, if you really want to get rid of Iran's nuclear program, I don't think you can do it from the air. I think you're going to have to send ground troops in, and that's going to meet with resistance, and it's going to cause casualties. Plus, it's politically very unpopular back home. But I think it's going to come down to that. So it'll be a multi-month operation. Now, we have air superiority, so Iran can't really get any resistance. Remember, we were in Iraq forever and Afghanistan because of the guerrillas. It wasn't really because they're military. We eradicated their military within a few weeks. And that will happen with Iran. A lot of it's already happened already. Iran, I think, has enough regular ballistic missiles for a couple of months. And they are still trading volleys. Iran has also said that they won't really consider talks to the U.S. unless the Israelis halt their attacks. And the U.S., as far as I know, has not pressured Israel to halt their attacks. It seems like between the two nations, Israel's more controlling the United States than the other way around. Netanyahu seems to own Donald Trump for whatever reason. But then again, Israel's had a lot of influence over other administrations as well. So things don't seem to be progressing well. And most world leaders have not welcomed the 2 week deadline. They don't think it's enough to actually really agree to some kind of deal, especially because Trump provoked people with the unconditional surrender, demand. And also, they still haven't asked Israel to stop the strikes, which is a non-starter for people like Iran. Obviously, Iran is losing, but they do control several backed militias, and they could definitely do some damage to U.S. bases, although they can't win the war. Obviously, Netanyahu and the United States are looking for regime change, but let me remind you that regime change has never really favored the United States in the long run, so I'm not really sure if that's a very good plan at this point. The people don't really like the mullah, but they also didn't like the Shah that the U.S. supported before the mullah. And, some people are thinking revolution, but I think revolution is going to be hard to achieve without the U.S. actually backing one side. And U.S.-backed leaders generally don't last very long in the Middle East because whether you believe Iran's majority religious or majority non-religious, there is a significant segment of the population that is devoutly religious, much, much greater than the United States. It could be 30-40% only, and that's not a majority, but that's enough to really tilt it towards theocracy. Now, in the U.S., maybe 60% of people will say they're Christian, but the really devout Christians probably are less than 20, perhaps even less than 10%. So America is not going to swing into a theocratic state like Iran is. So that's kind of what we actually have right now. And like I said, they have a big nuclear compound that's buried very, very deep underground. I don't even know if the bunker busters can actually reach it. So the only way to really shut it down is to send troops in, and take it over. But ground troops, we all know how that went in Afghanistan. Iran is full of mountains. Air support is going to be shaky at best in that kind of terrain. And there will be American casualties. Bombing them to Kingdom Come may not actually work. Also, Iran has offered no indication it is willing to move off its positions on enrichment, which it views as a red line. So their nuclear program is the red line. Obviously, they want the nukes. They say it's for energy, but I do believe it's for nukes. And they want the nukes, obviously, so they'll have more bargaining power. As long as you don't have nukes, people don't really take your threat seriously. If you have nukes, people will take your threat seriously. Israel, I don't think they're really afraid of Iran nuking them because that would result in instant annihilation for Iran. But they are afraid of Iran gaining more chips at the bargaining table. So I don't really know if this diplomatic solution is going to work. Trump hopes that a diplomatic solution is going to work, but without the ability to really rein in Netanyahu in Israel, it really doesn't seem like it. And I definitely think even though the administration probably doesn't want a multi-month solution, that's exactly what we're heading towards to, a multi-month solution with not a coalition of the willing this time, because they basically, like, America's not going to be able to, like, activate the NATO argument or whatever, Article 5 or whatever. But America looks like it might just send in troops on its own, which will result in attacks on our bases and casualties as well. So the thing is, Iran has offered that under some conditions that it will essentially that will shut down its nuclear program. But those conditions aren't realistic. They want Israel to dismantle all their nuclear bombs as well, so neither side has nukes, and also commit to a peaceful Middle East, which obviously Netanyahu and his hardliners are not going to do, because that would require them to back out of Gaza and stop their dreams of conquest for Gaza and the West Bank, and to reestablish like Greater Israel or whatever. So the situation room is looking very, very dire, and I do think the markets are going to reflect it. Once again, oil, today is Juneteenth, the markets aren't open. Oil is at 75 again on the global scale, and it's up from 56, and at 75.67 for oil. That's just not good for prices at the pump, which will affect the price of everything else. I actually saw that the oil stations changed from 270 here to about 306, so up of 30 cents. That's probably what it's going to be at for a while, unless the situation escalates, which it definitely could, and it can bump oil past $80. Once it bumps oil past 80, that's for sure going to trigger inflation. Because everything really depends on oil. I don't know if supply and demand for other things in the United States is really going to be affected that much. There is a little bit more unemployment, but the unemployment is still not that high. So because the unemployment is not that high, I don't really expect anything to change. If you look at the projections, we're looking at 4.5% unemployment at the end of the year, as opposed to 4.2 right now. But they do expect the PCE inflation and the overall inflation to be above 3%. So I don't think the bond market is going to really drop all that much at this point. And that's not going to play well with crypto, because the higher the bond market is, the more people that are going to invest in the bond market instead of risky asset classes. And there's going to be less people in crypto. Plus, with the PCE rising, overall consumer sentiment is going to be pretty bad, at least for the next 3 or 4 months. So we don't expect any kind of run, and many analysts, crypto analysts, do actually agree with me on that one. So the best case scenario is that this does get solved within 2 weeks. Oil goes back down to like the mid 60s, lower 60s. Inflation stays low, and then Jerome Powell starts cutting rates in July or September. But I think the most likely scenario, because you're not willing to basically hold back Israel from striking, is that the Iran situation is going to not come up with a solution. Oil is going to slowly start creeping up still, which will actually trigger inflation, which means Jerome Powell is not going to cut rates in either July or September, no matter how loud Donald Trump screams at this point. So yeah, I think things are really going to kind of like work in reverse at this point. Not the way we want it for the next 3 or 4 months, but after 3 or 4 months, at that point, maybe like the current regime with the mullahs will actually be kicked out. I don't know about a pro-democratic type of government in Iran, but at least another government maybe that's more favorable to the United States, the U.S. actually supports, because we're all about that. And at least for the next few years, we will get some temporary relief from this mess. Oil prices will actually go down, and then inflation can go down, and we can actually get some rate cuts, probably like late this year into next year. And basically at that point, altcoins can finally come up. So the timeline is still October, November, not like any time in the summer. Projected rates at the end of this year is 3.9, but I think they'll actually be around 4.2. And I do think Jerome Powell knows this as well. He's just trying to keep people optimistic that there could be rate cuts. But I think the likelihood of rate cuts is definitely getting lower and lower by the day as the situation in the Middle East escalates. So I mean, next year we're definitely going to go into midterms. Trump is going to have to make a lot of conciliatory behaviors to actually, like with a voter base, to actually buy some of their votes. Because right now with this Iran thing, especially if he sends troops in, his approval rating is going to like basically drop through the floor. It's already pretty low right now, but it's going to drop through the floor once he actually sends troops in. So he's going to he's going to have to like start printing, start offering like rebate checks or stimulus checks towards the midterms next year, and maybe that will actually stimulate economic activity. Hoping to get a couple of those checks next year myself, because if I'm gonna suffer through all this crap, at least I want to get something out of it. It will bring inflation a year or two down the line, but we all know Trump is kind of like a guy that's in the current moment. He doesn't really worry about like what's going to come a couple of years down the line. He might try to delay it until he's actually out of office. But if you print like that, you probably won't be able to. So that's the news for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe. Hit that bell notifications button. Thank you and have a nice day.